1 second, investigator.
Council needs to move, and one of the other council, I can't see the board, but council needs to move. They're welcome to do so. If we could just make sure that we don't block any of the jurors.
And we have a challenge here of getting everything in view for everybody, and I will do the best that I can to make it happen. One of the things I wanted just to make sure that I'm on the same page with you is, as you were taking some questions from Mr. Hogue, I was taking...
Hold on a second. You just give her room to get past you.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I can't see any of this stuff. Thank you.
You're not going to be able to see it if I move it over here, are you?
Too far from
We'll bring it back later.
Can't read that this far away again.
Okay, it's small, right? That's fine. Okay, but I want to make sure that I'm on the same page with you about your testimony, and so I was taking some notes, and just to the extent that I've gotten my note-taking right, you were talking a lot about generally and very specifically the conversation that you had with Greg McMichael, right?
Correct.
And we were talking in that conversation about how Mr. McMichael was talking with you on the subject of crime in the neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that there were entering autos and burglaries and break-ins, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that it had been going on for months, even far back as 2019.
Yes, sir.
The missing weapon and Mr. McMichael's concern or fear that Mr. Arbery may have had that weapon.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That Mr. Arbery was the same guy.
Yes, sir.
Who over and over and over and over again went into the house, the prime suspect, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There was also some discussion about what Mr. Greg McMichael was at least doing out there that day.
Yes,
right?
sir.
To stop this guy, right?
Yes, sir.
To stop him. Meaning, if you were to open that door and you were to come out and I stopped you, that's what you understand Mr. Greg McMichael meant. To stop this guy, to prevent him from leaving.
Yes, sir.
So that he could be arrested.
Yes, sir.
Figure out who he is, identified.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The discussion that you had with Mr. McMichael also dealt a little bit more generally with theft, about where in the neighborhood it had been happening. You recall discussing with him that the thefts had been happening throughout the neighborhood.
I believe that's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So to say throughout, we have several streets, as you can see from the map up here, and I've got a little bit bigger of a map here. But the streets that you understand to be in the neighborhood are Satilla Drive,
Yes, sir.
Burford,
Yes, sir.
Zellwood,
Yes, sir.
Holmes,
Yes, sir.
and Jones.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you, when talking with Greg McMichael, we're talking about crime that was happening throughout the entire neighborhood, right?
I believe so. I'm trying to remember the word throughout. That's why there's the pause, but I
Fine. And
believe
it's
so.
on, if you want to check it,
I
it's
would.
page 24, line 17.
Yep. Thank you
Okay.
for that.
Great, no problem. And you understood that not only was it happening in homes, but it was also homes as in people's residences,
Yeah.
but
Yes,
that
sir.
it was happening out of their cars as well.
Yes, sir.
Objection form question. That's not what this officer understands. It's what Greg McMichael said to this officer.
Fair enough. Let's go ahead and couch it in terms of
Yeah, that's
transfer.
what he said to you,
Yes, sir.
which then you incorporated into your brain to think about what's happening in this neighborhood, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you also were told that these crimes were happening not just at night, but in the middle of the day.
Yes, sir.
That is a specific thing that you know as an officer, that a lot of crimes happen in the middle of the day,
Yes.
including burglaries.
Crimes doesn't matter what time of day it
It
is.
doesn't matter what time. You're familiar that burglaries occur a lot during the middle of the day,
Yes, sir.
okay? Even on Sunday,
Even on Sunday.
especially on Sunday.
Even on,
Even on Sunday,
Even on
okay. So the issue is that as you're beginning to get this information from Mr. Greg McMichael, is it true that you're doing so that you can get an idea of what has been going on in the neighborhood in generally, about crime in the neighborhood?
yes, sir.
Okay. So that you can then, as you're investigating this case, try to figure out what exactly happened on February 23rd.
Yes, sir.
What it was that Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael were doing out there that day, right? Why
Yes, sir.
were they out there that day, right?
Yes, sir.
Also, because Mr. Arbery is involved in this perceived conflict, you, as you step into this case, are trying to figure out why Mr. Arbery is in the neighborhood that day,
Yes, sir.
right? So in trying to step into a case like this, an investigation like this, you want to try to figure out what is in the minds of these three people, Mr. Arbery and the two McMichaels.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And part of your inquiry is, what is Mr. Arbery doing in 220 Satilla,
Yes, sir.
right? Like, what's the purpose for him being there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the things that you have learned over the years is how to conduct an interview of a witness.
Yes, sir.
And in your training, you have had some class instruction on how to do that, right?
Yes.
So you were asked initially if you were post-certified.
Yes, sir.
In your post-certifications, you have a large classroom portion of your training that deals with interviewing witnesses. right?
I've had advanced training, basics a little light on the subject,
Okay,
but I've had interview and interrogations through state of Georgia, as well as interview techniques through FLETC.
okay. These are multiple classes
Yes, sir.
just on the subject of how to ask a person about what happened during a volatile situation.
Essentially, yes, sir.
Right. Interrogation being maybe trying to get the person to
A little more
admit something,
accusatory, a
more
little
accusatory.
higher tempo. Yes, sir.
Okay. But in terms of talking with witnesses, you have become accustomed to witnesses who have been in the middle of a violent situation
Yes, sir.
or a situation that has been very unsettling or upsetting.
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that even though people may be, some of them smarter than others or stronger than others or have greater emotional fortitude, that a traumatic situation can cause anybody to have difficulty in talking about what just happened to them?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in a situation, the teaching that you have is really how to lead that person through the interview.
I'd be careful in the word lead, as in I don't want
It's a
to
term of
give
art.
them.
It's a
Yeah, I
term
don't
of
want
art.
to give them
You're
the,
right.
the answers.
If the witness can answer the question before being interrupted,
Yeah, let him ask the question.
As simple as that. Lead. I don't want to lead them through and give them the answers, but guide, direct. Maybe being a softer term for the same thing. Keep them focused on one topic and then move to the next topic.
Right.
So we're not, trying to deal with everything at once, but one bite of the apple at a time.
Right. It's easy to pick up when a person is getting kind of off track and is kind of all over the place.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what you may do is you may say, hold on one second, let's go back to what you were just talking about. And not tell them the answer, but lead them through a set of or series of questions that'll help them break it down for you.
Yes, sir.
And you really control that.
I try to, unless they're going. If they're on a track, let them go.
Right. So as an example, in this case, where Greg McMichael says, we've had burglaries, break-ins, and auto thefts all over this neighborhood. That's something that is recorded, and it's now maintained as the record of what he said.
Yes,
right?
sir.
but it would be on you to say, hold on, let's talk about the burglaries first, right?
Yes, sir. And generally, we're going to try to figure that out.
Okay, and then you could say, just starting with the burglaries, where was it?
Correct?
Okay, and go through it step by step, right?
Yes, sir.
Same thing with auto break-ins,
Yes, sir.
right? You could ask Mr. Greg McMichael, whose auto got broken into? Do you have information? Could you give me the name of that person? Because I'd like to follow up on it. Is that's something you could ask him?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so to the extent that Greg McMichael is all over the map sometimes in this conversation, you certainly have the ability to slow him down and get him to answer specific questions that may clear up confusion in your mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. By the end of this conversation that you had with him, though, you were clear that Mr. McMichael had formed a belief that Mr. Arbery was the person responsible for breaking into this house down the street.
Referring to 220 Satilla.
220 Satilla.
Yes, sir.
And that Mr. McMichael was under the belief that there had been a burglary by Mr. Ahmaud Arbery in that house.
Objection. Former question. In addition, it calls for this officer's, you were under the belief that, he's under the belief that this is what's going on is inappropriate. We're talking about the words of Greg McMichael right now, not what this officer believes he believes.
Well, it's important, I think, Your Honor, to allow this officer to talk about how he went through his investigations and the decisions that he made. And part of this is him, like he said, determining what was going on. What was Greg McMichael doing that day? What was Mr. Arbery doing in the house that day? For this officer, I think it's important to show that he had made some conclusions as part of his investigation that I think is going to lead to some of the additional things that he did in the case.
Well, then you need to rephrase the question. What these statements are by Greg McMichael. You can ask him what he did next. If that then leads you there, then maybe, but not the way it's currently asked, so it's sustained.
All right. So once you got the information, Greg expressed to you his belief
Yes, sir.
that Mr. Arbery was committing thefts inside that home.
Objection. That is not what Greg McMichael said at all. And paraphrasing this is inappropriate, either specifically what Greg McMichael said, but to paraphrase it this way is outside, that's for the jury to determine.
Well, I can rephrase it even more specifically.
Well, let's keep to what he actually stated. It's
Okay.
sustained.
Thank you. Greg McMichael told you that Mr. Arbery was the prime suspect of the burglaries that he believed were committed in 220 Satilla.
Taking the full context of the conversation, yes, sir.
Yeah, he used those words,
Yeah,
prime suspect.
he did.
Okay. Now, you then went to gather some additional information or look into Ahmaud Arbery, did you not?
In what way? Like video from out there, yes.
So you gather, well, there's an objection, so I'll pause.
Objection. Objection to where we're going with this. This is not about Ahmaud Arbery. This is the statements of Greg McMichael.
Your Honor, this officer has done more than just take statements of Greg McMichael. This officer is one of the main investigators in the case. I don't understand why we're not allowed to go into other things that he's done.
Well, probably depends on what else he's done, but
I'm going to go
sure
very
the council
generally.
is aware of the evidence in the case and will ask an appropriate question.
Okay.
At this point, all I've heard is the beginning of it.
Okay. So in terms of you trying to figure out what was going on that day and Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, you did some investigation into Ahmaud Arbery.
I gathered video from Mr. English and spoke to Mr. Olson about video
Okay. To see how many additional times Mr. Arbery may have been in that residence.
to gather video from the 23rd,
Gather-
February 23rd, 2020.
Okay. Did you become aware of Mr. Arbery being inside 220 Satilla on other occasions than February 23rd?
I did through other investigators and the media.
Okay, well, let's not talk about what the media did, but as an investigator, don't you rely on the subpart investigations of other
Absolutely.
investigators in a case.
Yes, sir.
And that sort of information flows up the chain to investigators like yourself
Yes, sir.
to inform you
Yes, sir.
of what's happened in the case, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you had become aware of other videos wherein Mr. Arbery was in 220 Satilla Shores at night.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you yourself have been inside 220 Satilla Shores at night.
Yes, sir.
You went out there to kind of take a look around to see what it looked like, right?
Yes, sir.
And so when you go into 220 Satilla Shores at night, there are no working lights inside the residence at that point,
No, sir.
right? There's a street light that throws a little bit of light that way, but other than that, that's the only light.
That's it. Yes, sir.
Okay. And you then walked the entire property at night to determine everything that was there that could be seen, right?
Yes, sir.
When you did that, there was not a boat being kept inside the boat garage.
No, sir.
Okay, that had been removed when you did that.
I recall the boat being at the lift.
Okay, off, not inside the house.
Not inside the house, no,
There's
sir.
another boat back on the left.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
While we're adjusting, just a reminder, before Ms. Burton has an issue, it's nearly 4 o'clock.
Point where we can stop.
Yeah, we can start right now.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just take a 15-minute recess, and we'll come back for continuation of the evidence in 15 minutes. Thank you.
All right, for the jury, please. Please be seated.
All right, we'll take 15 minutes. I can't remember what the title is, detective, investigator? Investigator, thank you. You can go ahead and step down. I remind you that you're under oath. Do not discuss your testimony during the break with anybody.
Yes, sir.
All right, you'll be back in about 50, well, in, let's say 10 minutes, and that way we can get everybody placed. Okay, thank you.